Um, I'm here to talk about how to predict weather on Mars, but we need some background before. So I study I'm enrolling a PhD in computer science, and the focus of this study is apply computer techniques into, at the beginning, solar efficiency, solar energy efficiency. So with my research that will be published in the first paper, I see how the efficiency of the solar energy changed within the time from back in the 80s to right now. And with this, I got deeply involved in how climate works on Earth. So I thought, why don't go a little bit farther? And I end up on Mars. So after the research, some networking, and having a couple of coffees with really good people from the Astrobiology Center in Madrid, that this is associated with the NASA Institute of Astrobiology, this idea came true. So we are here, as I said, to predict weather on Mars. So what do we know about weather on Mars? So back in the 1976, the first Viking landed on Mars, and they started with this task, collecting data of weather and many other stuff. And in August 2012, Curiosity landed there, and you see the picture here. It's a selfie took by itself, so it likes to do these kind of things. And it's still kicking. So I want to focus right now in the Rover Environmental Monitoring Station. I will call it REMS for now, and this is the environmental station. Everything, measure all the weather information there. It's here. It has a mast and two bombs. The first bomb measures the air temperature and 1.5 meters on high, on ground level. Then also the surface temperature is measured, the pressure, and the wind. The pressure is measured by a pressure sensor that is inside the box. And the pressure is affected by dust devils, atmospheric tides, cold and warm fronts, and this kind of stuff. And it has filter on top to prevent the pollution because of the dust. There is a lot of dust on Mars. So, talking about the wind. So we get, as I said, the surface and air temperature, pressure, and wind. Wind is kind of tricky because when the Curiosity landed on Mars, one of the sensors got dysfunctional. So we cannot get the proper measurement of it. So there is a mesoscale model that is just a meteorological model developed by a physicist. And these models are used to understand and calculate how atmospheres work. And this model is called MRAMS, and it was developed to have some measurement of the wind there. What do we know about weather on Mars? So it's more extreme than here on Earth. The temperatures can vary from +20 to -125 degrees, so it's quite a lot. There are dust storms that hit the complete planet, and also dust devils. Now, let's go back to Earth. So, let's talk about neuronal networks. Neuronal networks, it's how a brain works. So they are formed by nerves, cells called neurons itself, and we can divide them, or they consist in three main parts. The first part is the dendrites. There are thin stems that you can see in the picture that will get the input from the outside or from another neurons. The body that is just making all the processing of the data, or the input signals, and it will make an output or calculate an output, and this will go through the axon. That is an extension that will connect with other dendrites. There is no real connection between them because there is a change of charge, but it's how it works. So this is a neuron, and a neural network is just a bunch of them connected to each other. And let's paint an example here how a neuron works. So let's imagine that this neuron gets some inputs, that this is these green numbers, and the processing, so what the body will do in this particular case is just pick the higher number. As you see, it's number 5. This is the output, and then it goes through the axon to the next neurons, as easy as that. So this may look very simple, but all the processing and thinking from the human brain is done by that, so it's quite a big thing. So it is estimated that a human brain has like 100 billion neurons, that they are quite a lot, and they are responsible for all the processing that our brain does. Now, what's an artificial neural network? So this is a tool that form part of the computer intelligence area from computer science. And it was just thought about how the brain works, a real brain. We do it on a computer. So the network itself learns from observation, and it can adapt itself. So it can be trained and adapt for different inputs. So the artificial neuron has three parts. As a neuron, real one, this is the inputs. Data come from the environment for another neurons. The body, this is the processes down there, and the output. What a network is just a bunch of neurons connect to each other. So as the picture you can see here. We can split it in three parts, three main parts. This is like the input layer, where all the data is driven through. Then the output of these neurons go to the hidden layer. There are a lot of bunch of neurons that do all the processing, all the calculation that should be done. And then it produces an output, and it goes out. So in this particular case, we only have one hidden layer, so you can have more if it depends on the complexity of the problem you want to solve. And there are two ways or two main strategies to train a network, an artificial neural network, or how this network learns. So this is so-called supervised learning and unsupervised. With the supervised learning, we have some input data, and we know the output, or the desired output. As an example, imagine that we have a bunch of data of house pricing, how much a house costs. So we have a bunch of houses, and then we have some information about the house, how big it is, how many rooms, how many green areas are around, schools, and so on. And we give all this data to the network train, get some patterns, or calculate some patterns inside this data. And when we give a different house out of this bunch of data we gave to train, it can estimate the price of this house. With the unsupervised learning, we get some data, but we don't know what to do with them. So the network will look for patterns and then cluster or classify the data in different groups. So an example of this would be, we have a number of documents with some information. We can bring these documents to the network. The network will look for some patterns or to classify them in different groups, and that's all. Going to Mars now. The data we get from REMS is the one that you can see here. We have date, temperature from air, surface pressure, time of the day, orbit, and ultraviolet radiation. We get measurements every 5 minutes, but for the network, I use just one measurement every hour. And the network is predicting or giving us an output, the temperature in the air, surface, and the pressure. The approach for training this network was supervised because we know the desired output of this. This is the temperature, air, surface, and pressure of the next day. Due to the complexity of the issue with one layer, hidden layer, it's enough. And it's worth to mention here that the instrumentation itself, the REMS, it has a band error from plus minus 5K. So this is some graphs from the network. You cannot see them so properly, but the red line is the prediction of the network. The blue line is the real data, and the green band is the error rate. So you can see here that the prediction is inside the band of error, so it's quite good. The network has less than 2% error rate, so it's quite accurate. This is a second day, and it's an example of third day. So what we can do with this data produced by the network? So there are sometimes, due to malfunction of the station, updates, or just data storms, that the machine cannot measure anything. So we can fill the gaps. So there is no measurement for like 3 hours. So the network will calculate these weather variables and put it there to give them to the scientists and to help on the studies. So as a good thing to have, or to next improvement to the network will be to predict dust there, because dust is a really big problem in Mars. These dust devils, when there is a dust devil, the Curiosity has some solar panels to get the energy. And if there is dust devil or dust storm, some dust will take over or take part into the solar panels. And with the time, the efficiency of the panels will decrease. So the machine can take less energy, can work less, and that affects directly to the lifetime of the mission. So if the network is able to predict when this dust devil or dust storm may happen, instead of using the solar panels, it could use the battery, save the panels, there is no dust, so the lifetime of the mission can be enhanced for a little bit. So the future development of this part of my work, it's validate the data with more data from REMS. So currently I made this network with 2013 bunch of data, but I'm working now from the bunch from 2013 to 2018, and to validate it. As you saw, I didn't predict wind because I didn't get this MRAMS model so far, but I plan to get it and put it there and also predict the wind. As I mentioned before, this dust effect, analyze it and may predict it to help it. And this month, the end of the month of November, a new mission will arrive to Mars with land. It's called InSight. And it, of course, has a meteorological station there. And the plan is also develop a network to predict the weather on the... It will land in a different position in Mars, and probably the weather is different. So we want to study that and to compare it, and maybe in the future just have different networks to predict weather in different locations on Mars. So just special mention to my collaborators, and thank you all.